Main events get remembered, champions get photographed, but every wrestling territory, especially Portland, was built on something just as important. The wrestlers who opened the show anchored the middle and made the stars look like stars. They didn't always leave with the belt, but without them, there is no main event. This is the Mid-Card Chronicle, featuring the dependable talents who made every card complete. Bulldog Bob Brown is one of those wrestlers whose reputation depends on when you saw him. Later in his career, he became something more of a caricature, loud, brash, almost exaggerated. And for many fans, that version of Bulldog Brown is the only one they remember. But earlier, that was a different story. In the early 1970s, particularly in Vancouver, Bulldog Brown was as over as just about anyone. The crowd believed in him. He had presence, he had credibility, and he had wins. Down went Man Mountain Mike, Dean Higuchi, Dutch Savage, Mark Lewin, Bearcat Wright, Don Leo Jonathan, and Stephen Littlebear. That's not a mid-card resume, that's a top-level run. Brown captured the Pacific Coast title 3 times and the Canadian tag titles 8 times, teaming with names like Gene Kaninsky, Dutch Savage, and John Quinn. In Portland, his role was a bit different. He would come in periodically. He wasn't always pushed to the very top, but he was protected. Many of his losses came by disqualification, keeping his credibility intact. And he appreciated the territory, saying, "Don Owen was the best in wrestling. He paid you very well. I enjoyed working for him. I'd look forward to Tuesdays and Saturdays. What a place." That tells you everything about Portland. For Bulldog Bob Brown, it was a place where the work mattered. And depending on when you saw him, you either remember the character or the force. Kendo Nagasaki arrived in Portland in September of 1984 and immediately made an impact. He didn't ease into the territory. He started winning right away, beating Mondo Guerrero, Kevin Kelly, Scott Ferris, Jerry Gray, Bobby Jaggers, and Siva Afi. That's a strong start in any era. He brought a presence that Portland needed at that time, a credible, dangerous heel who could step into meaningful programs right away. He teamed with Ed Wiskowski during Wiskowski's Mega Maharishi phase, and together they captured the Northwest Tag Team titles. It was an unusual pairing, but an effective one. Nagasaki also feuded with Bobby Jaggers and Billy Jack Haynes, placing him firmly in the upper mix. Before Portland, he had already crossed paths with Haynes in Florida, battling over the Florida title. So there was a history there, something the territory could build on. He stayed in the Northwest for about 9 months. Not a long run, but a productive one. In Portland, Nagasaki filled an important role. He was a heel you could believe in. Terry Gibbs' Portland story is one of stops, starts, and sudden turns. His first run in 1980 lasted just 1 week. 3 matches, 3 draws, 2 against Jonathan Boyd, 1 against Fidel Cortez. Not exactly the kind of debut that sets the world on fire. But when he returned in September of 1982, the situation was different. Portland needed babyfaces, and Gibbs stepped into that opportunity. At the time, the babyface side was thin. Brett Sawyer was just arriving. Dynamite Kid was in briefly to maintain his visa, and other names included Steve Pardee and Tommy Rogers. And Gibbs started strong. He defeated T.G. Stone, Mike Miller, Chris Colt, and even beat Gene Kaninsky. That's a serious set of wins. He began teaming with Brett Sawyer, and it looked like Portland had found a solid babyface combination. Then came the turn. It was quick, it was violent, and it was effective. On November 27, 1982, the show opened with a Losers Leave Town match between Gibbs and Sawyer. Sawyer won, but that wasn't the end. During Sawyer's post-match interview, chaos erupted. The Georgia Jawjacker stormed in and attacked him. And then it clicked. The Jawjacker was Gibbs. It was one of those moments wrestling does best. The reveal, the shift, the reinvention in real time. They met again on December 4th, and Sawyer won again. And just like that, Gibbs was gone. A short run, but a memorable one. Yasu Fuji's story in the Northwest is one of evolution. He first came to Vancouver in 1970, teaming with Chadi Yaguchi. Initially positioned in the mid-card, the team eventually broke through, defeating Don Leo Jonathan and Duncan McTavish for the tag titles. They returned briefly in 1971 before moving on. Fuji came back solo in 1975, working steadily into the 1976 season. During that stretch, he made a handful of Portland appearances under the Yasu Fuji name. But it was his 1978 return that changed everything. Now, he was Dr. Hiro Oda. At 6'4", he had size, and he had presence. He wasn't just part of the card anymore. He was near the top. He won a battle royal and picked up victories over Johnny Eagles, Ricky Hunter, and Rick Youngblood. He began teaming with Kurt Von Steiger, firmly placing them in the mix. There was momentum. In Seaside against Snuka, Snuka got color, setting up a return bout. That's how programs were built back then. Then everything shifted. October 7th, 1978, Killer Brooks and Roddy Piper arrived, and the entire landscape of the Northwest changed overnight. Oda remained through the end of the year, but his position shifted. The main event scene had new anchors. Oda continued wrestling until 1985. Now, Oda represents a familiar story in wrestling. Right place, right time, then suddenly, a different time. Not every wrestler becomes a face of a territory, but every territory survived because of the ones who show up night after night and make the card work. The steady hands, the character builders, the glue that held it together. This has been the Mid-Card Chronicles, because without the middle, there is no main event. This series is based on the Encyclopedia of Portland Wrestlers by historian Mike Rogers, available now on Amazon, and new episodes drop every Friday. So be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. I'm your host, Frank Culbertson, and thanks for joining us here on the Mid-Card Chronicles.